Hello and welcome to Predict It Live, only on Old Bull TV, your exclusive source for real-time coverage of the stock market for politics. We had a nice win last night in Pennsylvania with the fast action pick that we gave to you guys on Monday. This week's going fast. Today, though, all eyes are on Capitol Hill for the big, epically big House vote on the January 6th investigation commission. We suggested buying the top bracket yesterday. It seemed to pay off, and then all the game board pieces got scattered by Mitch McConnell earlier today. But we're gonna keep our eyes on that vote. We're gonna keep our eyes on the whip count. Pratik Chogley from Star Spangled Gamblers is here to help me break it down. We're also taking your questions, and we got a lot to get to, so let's get to it. So welcome back, political traders. I am your host, Flip Pideaux. First things first, if you are a new trader, we can get you started with up to $25 in free cash in your trading account. To get that, you just go to predictit.org/promo/oldbull25 for that deposit match. And viewers, if you have a question for us, assuming you're watching live, please feel free to ask away in the chat window. If, on the other hand, you're catching the replay, you can, of course, submit a comment or a question or a message either as a comment on the video or through Twitter by messaging us at Old Bull TV. Also, please take this opportunity to subscribe to the channel. The button is right down there. And once you do that, you can also hit that little bell icon to be notified whenever we go live. While you're doing that, let's say hello to Pratik from Star Spangled Gamblers. Pratik, how are you?
Hey, good. Congrats on the Pennsylvania pick.
Well, thanks. Yeah, and that's what we wanted to start off with, is doing a little bit of a recap, a brief victory lap that you'll indulge us in for just a moment. But we want to kind of look at the dynamics of how this unfolded. So this was not a terribly hard call going into it based on the fundamentals. It's not as though we were picking out a real underdog or long shot that paid off. In fact, I think this was around 70 cents or high 60s when we recommended it. And again, our justification was pretty straightforward. 18 of the last 18 Pennsylvania state ballot measures, referenda, and amendments that are put to the voters directly have passed. Pennsylvania simply likes to pass these ballot measures. In fact, I think it's been 40 years since a balloted constitutional amendment has failed in Pennsylvania. And that's what this was. It was a ballot constitutional amendment to curtail or really give to the state legislature some of what are currently executive powers held in the office of the governor during periods of disasters. So notably over the course of the pandemic, the governor's popularity in Pennsylvania has waned. He's now underwater in terms of popularity. And this move sought to claw back some of those sort of unitary powers back to the people via their elected representatives. The governor opposed it, of course, but not surprising since it was stripping him of some powers. And given his lack of popularity, we didn't think that his opposition was sufficiently compelling as to lead to voters in Pennsylvania rejecting this. It did fall pretty cleanly along partisan lines, but with no major races yesterday. The biggest draw at the municipal level that might have brought out voters in heavily blue districts was, I think, a district attorney primary in Philadelphia. There were no mayoral primaries, at least in big cities. And in the special elections for state legislative races, on balance, there was more activity going on in red-leaning districts than in blue-leaning districts. So all the fundamentals seem to line up there for this to carry. It did. And so, it was trading at around 70 cents is now, I think, at 99 cents. I'm not sure if this is actually resolved yet or not. I guess not, because they're still going to be counting some of the late mail ballots. But you can now sell, if you bought at wherever you bought, you can now sell at about 99 cents. But this was a really wild ride last night, and you're looking on screen at the 24-hour chart. Of course, this market is barely more than 24 hours old. As I said, it just came out. It was just listed predicted on Monday, and effectively resolved yesterday, a day later. But you can see this huge dip here. This is when results started to be reported shortly after 8 p.m. last night. And interestingly, the very first results that came out, county after county, blue counties, red counties, was showing this measure being defeated by 3-1, 4-1, even 5-1. But what folks weren't noticing, and it took them better course of a few hours to notice, even though we were sort of flagging this in the comment section and on Twitter, was that virtually all, in fact, at first, literally all of the votes being counted were the mail ballots. And if there's one lesson we learned in 2020, it's that especially during a pandemic, there's a significant partisan skew to mail-in balloting versus same-day balloting, the in-person election day voting. And so if you looked at kind of the balance of who was voting in the contested Republican primaries and contested Democratic primaries, you were seeing these trends of 5 or 10 to 1 Democrats out polling, out participating Republicans. And so, you either had to assume that there was going to be a huge partisan wave here in terms of the actual turnout, or that simply we were seeing this relatively predictable, significant partisan skew in the mail-in balloting. And of course, then over the course of the night, as more and more the election day, the same day votes started to trickle in, the vote share of this amendment passing ticked up from 25, 30, 35, 40, eventually to 50, and to where it is now. I think it was still against the mail-in ballots to be counted, but it's now leading by 7 or 8 points. It's something like 53.5 or 54%. To pass. And so there really aren't enough votes out there that are not yet counted to change it. So this one is really done and dusted. Again, it might take a little while to resolve because PredictIt usually likes to wait until the certified results are available, especially if it's not that this one was close, but it wasn't a landslide. But again, if you don't want to stick around to wait for that extra penny, you can clearly go sell any existing stake you have for 99 cents. Pratik, I don't know, were you watching the action last night? Outside of since the midterms, this was probably the latest I stayed up watching election returns. And of course, it was for something as obscure as a primary and special election in Pennsylvania. But it dragged on well into the night. I finally packed it in around 12:30, but it was still quite lively at that point.
Yeah, no, I mean, I bought a small position on your recommendation. I knew nothing about the market beyond that. But what you mentioned is correct, and it's a lesson, I think, that cuts across a lot of these markets, especially ones where there's relatively little information, which is that even when the fundamentals lead you to arrive at a certain position during the actual voting, when the early numbers are coming in, markets just go absolutely crazy. I mean, I think whatever you think about wisdom of the crowds is a theory. I think it very much falls apart when traders are just panicking with early returns coming in. So I think one lesson I've learned just over the years trading is don't panic the early numbers. If you have an argument, a thesis that you're going into, unless there's really a strong reason to question that, and you really have an informed reason to do so on the basis of early numbers coming in, just kind of hold, don't panic, and ride it all out.
Yeah, no, it's a really good point too. And of course, if you were able to see that coming, or just sort of learn the lesson of PredictIt over the years that, hey, during live unfolding events, election night, there's going to be overreaction, sometimes several rounds of overreaction in both ways. And so if you kind of held some powder dry and didn't jump in at high 60s or 70, where we were flogging this, and instead waited for this huge pullback, you could have gotten in basically at half price. I think, what did it get down to? 37, I see, was the closing hourly low, but it got down as low as 15 at one point in sort of the peak panic. So if you were opportunistic here, you really could have cleaned up very nicely. But let's call that victory lap complete. Let's get to the more current markets, the still unfolding markets. This is another one, though, that we did first look at yesterday. It just hit the site on PredictIt yesterday. This is how many yay votes will there be in the House in favor of the establishment of the investigation, the commission investigating the January 6th Capitol attacks. And Pratik, there's so much to go over here. So much has happened in the 25 hours that this market has been live. This vote, by the way, is supposed to be, I think the House is going to start taking their votes. They're in session now. They're going to start voting in about a half an hour. I think the vote on this market, on this bill, is said to be about 5 p.m., but that could move up or back depending on the pace of legislative business. But to recap sort of the state of play here, John Katko, the ranking member, Republican member of the House Homeland Security Committee, was deputized, authorized by House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy to negotiate this supposedly bipartisan commission to investigate the events of January 6th. And he had sort of a roadmap, which largely mirrored a bill sponsored by Republican members a few months ago for a similar commission. Katko got basically everything he wanted in the negotiation. The compromise they put together looked like what Kevin McCarthy supposedly wanted. And so it seemed that this was going to be a great big, kind of hands across America kumbaya moment with a real bipartisan vote. McCarthy then yesterday, in a surprise move, came out and said he was opposing the passage of this, but that they weren't formally going to whip the Republican delegation against it, but that he was opposed to it. Steve Scalise, the minority whip, put out a statement saying, or his representative put out a statement saying they are not going to formally whip against it. They then reversed themselves on that, and they said, okay, well, we're not formally doing it, but we're putting out an informal leadership advisory, specifically telling members that they needed to call leadership if they were planning to vote yes, in other words, to buck the minority leader on this. To give you a brief recap of the basic math here, what we recommended yesterday was that you buy the top bracket in this market, which is that there would be 245 or more yes votes. This was trading at about 30 cents at the time. You can see it's now at 39, so that sounds nice, but it's been quite a ride since then so you have about 218 Democrats in the House ready to vote yes on this, possibly one more if a currently absent member returns today. His wife having given birth to a baby daughter earlier this week. That's Jared. I'm blanking on his last name. It doesn't matter, but I'm not going to be able to move on till I remember what his name is. Jared Golden from Maine. If he returns, then I think they've got 219. So to get to the 45, the Republicans need 26 defectors effectively. Now, what caused the price in this market to really pop yesterday, it got up to 75 or 80, I think, earlier this morning, in fact, was the fairly large, at this point, I think 58 strong Problem Solvers caucus that voted in favor of endorsing this bill. So this is 29 Democrats, 29 Republicans, and per their internal caucus rules, if more than 50% of each party membership of the caucus endorses it, and if in total more than 75% of the caucus endorses it, then they will vote as a block and all vote for it on the House floor. So that would be 29 additional Republican votes to add to the 218, possibly 219 Democrats. It gives you enough to get to the 245, even before you have any other defections from the rank and file. And of course, there would presumably be at least a few. We know of at least one in Chris Stewart. And then, of course, there are three more Republican members who voted to impeach Trump who are not in the Problem Solvers caucus. So it looks like you would have probably upwards of 30, maybe 28, 29 before you even get to unannounced rank and file defections. More than enough, if not by a huge margin, more than enough to put you in that top bracket. Then, of course, you've been paying attention to this. You already know this. The big but, about 90 minutes ago, Mitch McConnell, of course, the Senate Republican leader, minority leader, announced that he's opposed to it. Up until now, he has basically said, I want to look at it. I want to see what the House does. I'm sort of open to it. I'm open to letting it, our membership vote on it. He has now come out and officially opposed it. And we've been sort of trying to read the tea leaves, read the statements, read the tweets from the various members that might be on the fence. Talk to one Republican member of the Problem Solvers Caucus today, who did confirm that McConnell's opposition here likely does move the needle for at least some sort of on the fence Republicans here. So now the question is, what's the bare minimum to get to this top bracket? Because again, this is now pulled back. This top bracket has from around 75 or 80 cents down to now just 39. So, what seemed like almost a done deal. In fact, before McConnell came out, I was thinking we might wind up 255, even 260, well into that top bracket. With McConnell, this could be a lot more of a squeaker. I think given how much this is pulled back, I still see a lot of value in that 245 or more, but there's a lot more hair on this trade now that McConnell has come out. And so you basically have unified leadership, bicameral leadership within the Republican Party against this. The question is just how many House Republican members are looking for that cover, whether they voted to block certification of election results or otherwise want to have some accountability to their constituents, if not their colleagues, who they were sheltering in place with on that day in January 6th, showing that they take this seriously. Again, given that the contours of it basically match a package that was proposed by Republicans not long ago. So how do you square that with defecting from the unified leadership that's asking you, if not formally, quite clearly, to vote against? So the math now, we've got these 29 members of the Problem Solvers Caucus, the Republican members. If you have 218 Democrats, again, we don't know if we have 218 or 219. Let's assume we have 218. You then need 27 Republicans. We're told by this Republican member of the Problem Solvers Caucus that an expected 24 of the 29 would vote yes. This is before McConnell announced his opposition, so that 24 could have softened. But if it's still 24, in other words, the number that are willing to defect from their defection, that are willing to not vote as a bloc per the rules of their caucus, assuming that hasn't changed, you would need those 24. You'd need the 3 non-Problem Solver Caucus members who did vote to impeach Trump, and that gives you exactly 27. Okay, again, you have this at least one other, Chris Stewart, not involved in either group, which would take you to 28. But that then only puts you at 246. So you need basically no more softening of these numbers. You get a little more comfort if there are other uncounted rank and file out there that have not made public statements, but they are inclined to vote for this. And, with a couple hundred other members, that's certainly a possibility. So this is going to be much more of a squeaker than it looked like it would this morning. Again, with this now having pulled back so significantly, it's basically trading at half of what it was a couple of hours ago. I still like B max here better than any of the other brackets. There's a case to be made in my mind for the second highest bracket, 242 to 244. That's trading at 22 cents. But if we wind up at less than 245, it likely means there was further erosion, not only in the rank and file, but among the Problem Solver Caucus Republican members. And if there is further erosion there, in other words, if they're skittish enough by McConnell saying don't vote for this, that they're going to back away from their collective endorsement, then who's to say it would just be 2 or 3 of the 24 and not 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that would make it hard for me to say, yeah, you really want to zero in on that second, the sort of penultimate bracket here. So again, I still gravitate to B max. I think it's obviously on sale here, at least versus where it was a little bit earlier today, acknowledging that the fundamentals have changed in the intervening time period. But I still look to this number. Yeah, I think we had a big enough cushion, likely big enough cushion of say 10 to 15 votes prior to McConnell, and on the presumption, supposition, speculation that those Problem Solver Caucus votes are perhaps a little bit stickier, a little bit more durable than an average rank and file member in terms of getting skittish with McConnell opposing, that I think there's a greater than 40% chance this thing happens. I don't think it's much more than even money, much better than even money, but I'd say it's worth 50 cents plus. So this is a higher risk trade to hold on to now. If you were with us 24 hours ago and you bought at 30, you may want to say, great, I've made a 33% return since then. It's now at 40, so I'm just going to take money off the table. This is now a higher risk trade than it was a couple hours ago and even than it was yesterday. I thought it was a sort of a screaming value at 30 cents yesterday. It's now interesting and pretty compelling at 39, but not without a lot more risk. That being said, too, this is a great opportunity to have, just like we've been kind of focusing on all week, this sort of fast action, fast resolving markets. You're probably going to know the answer to this within about 4 hours, possibly less. And you've really got to keep an eye on the news dribbling out, because the statement from 1, 2, or 3 different congressmen could really tip the odds dramatically. And so if you're not already, I would encourage you to follow us on Twitter at Old Bull TV. We'll be as much as we can, as close to in real time as we can, bringing you those updates as they come out over the course of this afternoon. But that's sort of basically the state of play. This is an exciting one. It's sort of 2 quickly resolving markets, close succession in 2 consecutive days. So there's a lot to keep you on your toes. There's a lot of news to consume. There's a lot of price action to try and keep abreast of. You may want to take the Pennsylvania market is a little bit of a lesson too, as Pratik was mentioning. You see these swings, and sometimes they are irrational. Frequently, they are irrational when it's in response to evolving, unfolding real-time events. So maybe you look for a more opportunistic way to get in. If there's something else that comes out and maybe it doesn't fundamentally change the odds, but it sort of spooks the market, maybe you get this for 30, 35 cents. So maybe you want to just hold some dry powder and see if you can get in and sort of scalp some even cheaper shares. But we're looking at the tape in front of us as it is, and I'm seeing now it's ticked up again a little bit here to 43 cents, but the bid ask is basically 41 to 43. So if that's where you can get in and you're to make an evaluation, do you want to be on the yes side, the no side, or not play? I think this is a compelling enough price. I think it's come down enough. Again, I think there was enough of a cushion. There's enough of kind of this black hole of a couple hundred GOP members in the rank and file who haven't really made their position known one way or the other. And it wouldn't take more than a few of them to be inclined towards yes for this to get back into safe territory. So I'm going to stay with a buy on BMAX. Pratik, what do you think here?
Yeah, no, that was a great breakdown. I mean, I think my analysis from yesterday has not fundamentally changed. I think right now we're seeing an overreaction to the McConnell announcement. You can, to me, the evidence of the fact that it's overreaction can be seen in the lower brackets, where I think some of them just don't make sense. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine why, for example, 230 to 232 or even 235 should be trading where they are. And so if you just want the safe profits, I mean, I think one very respectable strategy here is just to get bargain prices on the very low markets and get a nice safe return here. But I think more fundamentally, I don't have a strong view, but I'm inclined to agree with you that I think BMAX may still be a bargain. And I think, again, it just comes down to, number one, different incentives between leadership and rank and file. It's very obvious why leadership would not want this to be consuming the agenda and basically now creating another set of news cycles about a civil war within the Republican Party. But if you're a rank and file person, I think, as you said yesterday, I mean, voting in favor of a commission with relatively benign language, it's not all that dangerous of a vote one way or the other. And I think we saw with the impeachment votes as well, that there were a number of people who, especially in the Senate, who just kind of weren't inclined to get in front of the press, but then did ultimately vote yes at the last minute. So I don't know. I think if you have a lot of people staying silent in the House right now, and leadership isn't exerting too much pressure, I mean, unless these members of Congress really know that their voters are against this commission more so maybe than we're detecting, I'm inclined to think that BMAX right now, especially in the aftermath of a McConnell panic, may not be a bad buy.
Excuse me. No, it's well put, and I appreciate your highlighting a couple of the other brackets as well, where you might be able to get some lower return but lower risk profits. Also worth noting too, a couple of the news sources that we've been following on this, The Hill, Scott Wong on The Hill says, excuse me, post McConnell, he's looking for sub 30 Republicans to defect, maybe actually in the 20 to 25 range, which would not be enough. Conversely, Punchbowl, which has really been all over this, and the reporting has been second to none, is still looking for about 30. In fact, they're quoting multiple senior Republican sources on The Hill, excuse me, that are saying they expect the number to be right around 30, which would be enough. In fact, you'd have a cushion of a couple. So I keep trying to find out whether Jared Golden is back on the Hill, because that would be the ultimate ending to this market, would be for him to cast the 245th yay vote. But should he have returned, and again, should we get even a couple of unexpected yeses among rank and file Republicans, we get back into much safer territory pretty quickly. But that is, of course, a fairly big if. So we are keeping an eye on this. It's going to be a long 4 hours in terms of news cycles. There's going to be a lot to watch. So again, follow us on Twitter. We'll do our best to keep you updated and keep an eye on the pricing of those top few brackets. Meantime, relatedly, in the new markets category, we got a few new markets on PredictIt today, and one is the one that you probably knew was coming. It is the Senate counterpart to this House yay vote market. So this one has a much longer dated expiration. This is June 25th. So this one's got about 5 weeks to unfold, and I'll get into why that's something to keep in mind in a minute. But this is also one that fundamentally changed when McConnell made his announcement, having said earlier that he was sort of in a wait and see mode about whether or not he was going to support it. And you can see here the pricing really reflects McConnell's newfound overt opposition. And then it's showing 7 in 10 chance that 59 or fewer yay votes are cast for this. And of course, that also includes the proposition that simply doesn't get a vote, or it fails via voice vote or anything else. Basically, if it doesn't pass, or if it does pass with fewer than 60, also that would resolve in the yes. But the 59 or fewer, importantly, does capture the idea of it simply never being brought to a floor vote, or being brought to a floor vote and failing. What is interesting about this, before we get into talking about the specific senators with the longer term expiration possibly, is that this is not tied specifically to House Resolution 3233 or any particular bill. This is just tied to whether or not the Senate votes in favor of the establishment of a commission to investigate the events of January 6th. So if they go back to the drawing board, or Pelosi decides she wants to put this through the House Intelligence Committee instead of the Homeland Security Committee, and just make it more onerous or less palatable to Republicans, sort of as punishment, or to make it more palatable in hopes of getting more bipartisan compromise, and something like that were to then come through committee and come up for a vote, that would still satisfy this market. But to play that probably longer shot option, you would probably want to wait for this 59 or fewer price to go even higher upon the presumptive scuttling of HR 3233, when people aren't maybe as aware or paying attention to the fact that, maybe this doesn't need to go to 98 or 99, because there's still the possibility of over the course of the next 5 weeks of something else happening. So that's just one thing to keep in mind on 59. But in terms of the 59 or fewer bracket, but in terms of the actual whip count here, such as it is, I want to pull up a little bit of a summary that we've been trying to put together sort of on the fly as this news has been unfolding, of some of the Senate names to keep an eye on. So you've got, of course, 50 Democrats in the Senate, 50 Republicans, or the 50 Democrats include the 2 independents who caucus with the Republicans. Importantly, for the PredictIt rules, they do not count a tie-breaking vote by Vice President Harris as a vote for this market. So it's only counting the 50 seated senators. Here we've got a list of what do we have? It's about 12 Republicans who might be in the mix. Obviously, McConnell has come out and said he's opposed. So we've got him in the no column. Ron Johnson yesterday said that he was opposed. Now here you've got 7 Republicans, some of whom voted to convict the president on impeachment. They're noted by a little asterisk on the right-hand column there. Some did not, but these are basically 7 that were identified by the Washington Post in a story they did yesterday as supporting the establishment of the January 6th commission. Now, they're sort of qualitative and subjective shades and distinctions between the comments that the Post collected from these senators' offices or from the senators themselves. You can find that on the Post article. But they were all pretty plain language in terms of, yes, we support the establishment of the commission. And importantly, they said, yes, we think it should only be focused on the events of January 6th. If you remember from yesterday, we were talking about the fact that McCarthy's objection, which the guys at Punchbowl described the rank and file Republican reaction to as incredibly lame. McCarthy's objection basically boiled down to one of scope. He said, well, fine, we can investigate that, but we also want this commission to investigate other acts of political violence, including the Black Lives Matter protests from summer of 2020 and going back even into prior years. But for these 7 that in the statements that the Post collected, they specifically, most of them said, in fact, not only should there be a commission, but we think it should be specifically focused only on the events of January 6th. So they kind of went out of their way, it would seem, to reject McCarthy's rationale for opposing. The big grain of salt here, though, is that all of those statements were collected before McConnell's opposition today. And in fact, there was a new statement put out by Senator John Thune's office saying he hasn't really decided. He wants to see what the House does. They're not whipping this in the Senate yet, so they're sort of standing back, and he's not really making his decision yet, which, again, is fairly contrary to what he told the Post yesterday. It's evidence of the fact that the axis has really tilted since McConnell came out and said this. Now, the reason this is so important, and that Thune, even though he's just sort of one example of the 7, would be enough to really tip the odds here, is that if the math here is pretty easy to figure out. They need 60 votes while the filibuster is still intact anyway to get this done. And with the Democrats only having 50, these 2 at the top being no's, you need all 7 of these guys that indicated at least soft support for it, for that support to stay firm, basically. And then you need these 3 other Republicans who did vote to convict on the impeachment charges, but have not yet made public pronouncements about their position on the January 6th commission. You need all 3 of those undecided or undeclareds to become yeses, and you need all 7 of these yeses to stay yeses. And again, it appears, at least in the one case where we've heard an update since McConnell, the yes is very much now a sort of maybe, or yes/maybe at best. So we get back to the pricing on this market. And actually the 59, just since we've been talking here, has been jumped from 70 cents to 79 cents. So I think that's probably at this point pretty fair pricing. I also think it's tough to jump into a market like that is as fluid as this is, and that so hinges on the House vote. Now, if we take what Thune said to be potentially representative of the way other senators are looking at this and trying to make up their own minds, they may in fact be taking as one input to their decision making how much cover they have from the House. So if the Problem Solvers Caucus indeed delivers 24 or more Republican members voting in favor, and if a handful of the rank and file join them in support of establishing the commission, if you do get 30, 35, even closer to 40, say, Republicans defecting, the headline will be, yes, this was a genuinely bipartisan thing. Groups of people that had not yet sort of bucked Trump in these proxy votes decided to. And so we can all sort of think of the establishment of this commission as a bipartisan way to move forward. It's not as driven by ideology or hurt feelings over the election or anything like that. Then maybe these yeses, these Senate whip count yeses become a little bit more firm, or maybe these Senate maybes start to become lean yeses. That's a lot of maybes. I'm not saying I want to short the 59 or fewer either. It's a lengthy way of saying I'm not really interested in any of these brackets at this point, at least not right now. My opinion on that could change by the end of the legislative session in the House today as we see what they're doing. Certainly going to keep this market open and be tuned into any news from any of these senators and to see how the vote goes in the House chamber. But we'll obviously continue to cover this one. I'm sure we'll be talking about this one tomorrow and thereafter. This is going to be, unless the bill completely dies, there's going to be a lot of action in this market for a while yet. This is not going to be as quickly resolving as the ones we've been looking at the last 2 days, clearly. But Pratik, I know this is the ink is still dry on this one, but based on the kind of proto pricing we're seeing here in the early trading and what of these very quickly shifting events on Capitol Hill, how are you kind of handicapping the interesting brackets on this new market?
Yeah, I agree with you again. I don't really have a strong view as to why 79 is either too high or too low. I think we'll probably get some clarity. Again, I kind of have the same take here. I think that, I think PredictIt might not have done the bracketing exactly correctly here. So I'm just going to be looking for quick, small profits in the very high brackets that we're almost certainly not going to hit. I mean, right now it's not really, there aren't really good deals to bother with, but you might see some kind of market movement in the coming days. And that's kind of where I am right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. And again, I appreciate you bringing up the tending to focus only on sort of the key or sort of most central bracket, but there are these sort of different risk profile profits to be made elsewhere in the bracket complex. And in particular, in this one, in this post-McConnell opposition world that we suddenly live in, these upper brackets to me don't make any sense. I mean, to the uppermost bracket being 76 or more, before we knew where McConnell was going to come down, sure, theoretically possible. Now, virtually impossible, not just for 76, but for anywhere near it. I think if PredictIt were recasting the brackets now, they probably would do about the same number, but probably one wide brackets rather than two wide. So you would have an upper bound of maybe 68, something like that, and you'd have just individual, 60, 61, 62, which are always interesting because those, pivot on any given statement from any given senator. But yeah, so I was kind of counting through the plausible yeses before. You really need every even conceivable yes to become a yes, and the soft yeses to stay yeses, and the conceivable yes/maybes to become yeses, just to even get to 60. That's going to be difficult enough. So really, the only brackets that would seem to be in play here would be the 59 or fewer, 60 or 61, and maybe 62 or 63. Again, the only other super outside shot here is that the whole thing gets scrapped. They come up with a better deal, or a deal that the Republican leadership can more get behind. And maybe they find their way to a broader bipartisan compromise. So it's not to say there's no risk in shorting even one of the very high brackets here, but it's a very remote chance that I think winds up playing out that way. So yeah, you're focusing really on the bottom few, at least as we're currently able to understand the dynamics. But Pratik, what other sources? Because I've got so many tabs open right now on my browser that I can barely even make sense of them. What other sources are you kind of monitoring in real time? We've referred to a couple of them. The Hill's been doing great reporting on this. Punchbowl News has been doing great reporting. Trying to talk to as many staff members and members, staffs, and members themselves as possible to get as much from the horse's mouth as we can. But share with folks if you have any other sort of real time radars and barometers and news feeds that you're looking at to try and kind of stay ahead of the market on this one.
Well, look, one thing, if PredictIt might be willing, it might be interesting actually to introduce here on the Senate side, maybe markets on how individuals will vote as we get some clarity, because I think markets like that can also help us figure out what assumptions traders are bringing in and the way they're pricing the overall number of votes here. And that way you can kind of figure out if you think the markets are broadly rational or not. I mean, I know everyone makes fun of it, but I actually think for something like this, I actually think the PredictIt comment section is kind of the easy, lazy way to sort of figure out what's going on, just because you have people who actually have money on the line and are sharing different links and news and whatever as it comes out. You obviously have to be careful with pumps and whatever. But I think that for those who don't have as much kind of time or interest or resources to be able to do the kind of whip count that you're doing, which is sort of the gold standard, I kind of think just keep track of the comment section and PredictIt and sort of follow the regulars on Twitter, and I think that'll get you a good enough set of information to make an informed bet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as you alluded to, you have to kind of filter through the shit posters and the pumpers on the PredictIt message boards, internet cesspools as they are. But you're absolutely right too, that they can be a really good kind of real-time repository of stuff, that as long as you're following links out to credible sources rather than consuming any posters analysis at face value. I say that as an occasional poster on these message boards myself, so I'm not trying to denigrate my own analysis I may post on them. But obviously, you really can't take anything at face value there unless you're being led outward to a more kind of primary source. But do keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. We'll try and keep you as real-time updated as possible. We're at Old Bull TV. Pratik is at PJ Chogley. I think it's in his Chiron there under his name, so certainly follow him as well. I would keep an eye on both of these markets, the House market and the Senate market. I think it's a great suggestion there if PredictIt is able to launch a handful of binaries on sort of the most in focus senators as well, because especially where you have one like this where the a lot of the probability is falling into one of the bookend markets, it can become less interesting to try and speculate on one given member if their vote is not going to bounce it out of that minimum or maximum market. So I think that would be great if we wound up seeing a couple of those. We certainly would bring those to you here as well. We want to know what you all think. So again, please let us know in the comments. Let us know by messaging us on Twitter. We'll certainly be coming back to this one. So please make sure you're subscribed, following us on Twitter, receiving those bell notifications so that you'll know every time we go live. And, if we don't connect directly with you in the interim, we will at least see you back here at 1 p.m. tomorrow. Stay tuned. It's going to be, I think, another eventful 24 hours. But thanks so much for joining us. Thanks to the folks at PredictIt. Thank you, Pratik, for joining us once again. Happy trading, and we'll see you next time.